So I don't have any fabric long enough right now to show you how to make it. But this is the way that I was taught how to make it. I was taught to use shown on paper first, so that way I understand all the measurements and how things work. So I usually use 2 yards of fabric, which would be the long way right here, and it's completely unfolded. So when you get it from off the bolt, it's folded in half. You want to unfold that, so you're gonna end up with your selvage ends on both sides like this. So you're going to fold it like this in half, and you're going to end up with 2 selvage ends, and then you're going to fold it again up like this, so all 4 selvage ends are on this side. Then you're going to end up with a side that has 2 1/2 and a side that's completely in half. This is the center of your skirt, and it goes like this. So the big fold is here, the 2 folds are there, and the 4 singles are over here. So this is the top, and this is your waist. So whatever your waist is, you want to add 5 to 6 inches and divide by 4, because you're looking at this as quarters. Here's 1/4 of your skirt, here's the other quarter, and then the other 2 quarters. So your skirt is quartered, so you want to divide by 4. So for example, my daughter's waist is 40 inches. I add 5 inches to get 45, divided by 4 is 11 1/4 inch. I measure out on the top 11 1/4 inch. This is your straight side. So if you're using a cutting mat, line this up with one line, so that way your top and your bottom cuts are straight. So you mark out 11 1/4 right here. Don't cut yet. Now for your length, which is right here. So the length, you are going to need the length, which my daughter has a 27-inch length, but you're going to need 3 inches for your casing. For your elastic, if you use this kind of elastic, the 3/4 inch elastic, you will need 3 inches for your casing. And then 2 inches for your hem. If you don't do a hem, you don't need this. Sometimes I use bias tape and I go around the bottom. But we'll put it this way. It's easier to cut material off to get the length that you want versus trying to add. So I usually just keep the 2 inches in there, and if I don't need it, then I don't need it. So 27 inches plus 3 plus 2 is 32 inches. You're going to measure from this top line 32 inches down. And then right where that is, you're going to bring in your 11 1/4 again. This is that mark here. To show how much extra you want to add for your step. Now don't forget, this is quartered. So if you add 8 inches for your step, that's 2 inches per side. That's going to be a very big step. It's going to be a wide, billowy A-frame. If you want just a normal A-frame, add 4 inches. So that means you're only adding 1 inch on each side. I chose 5 inches for her step, just because she wants to run and jump, but she doesn't want it to be too billowy. So you need to take this measurement that you got for your waist, so 11 1/4, plus whatever you want your step inch divided by 4. So that ends up being 11 1/4 plus 1 1/4 makes 12 1/2. So this line right here, you're going to mark all the way out to 12 1/2. And you're going to mark that off. You are going to cut this using a straight edge, whatever straight edge you can find, scissors, that's fine. Go old school, use a book, it still works. You're going to cut this length, and don't forget to cut this up here, just ever so slightly, very little, just because these aren't in 4s, they're only in 2s. So once you have that, this is what it'll look like, and I just used another piece of paper and I cut it just so that it wasn't ruining the directions. So you're going to end up with something like this. Now it'll look like this after you cut it. and then you can open it up and you will have 2 exact perfect sides. Now, the reason I choose to do this versus just laying it out on and cutting each side is I've never been able to get these 2 to match when I do that. So then my skirt always ends up wonky. So if you do it this way, the edges are perfect for both sides. Now, I like to start with my hems and press my hems, so that way I know how far up to start my ribbons. So the easiest way to do that is to measure 1 inch, 2 inch, all the way across. You fold up to 1 inch, press. Fold up to 2 inches again, press. So that way you end up with this nice double rolled hem if you're doing a hem. If you don't want to do a hem, don't worry about that, because if you use bias tape. Don't worry about it if you use bias tape. You need to do the same thing for your casing, except for it's not 1 inch, 2 inch, it's 1 inch, 3 inch. So you'll roll in 1 inch, press, roll in roll in down to your 3 inch mark, press again. You don't sew this shut. If you sew it shut right now, you won't be able to put in your elastic for later. So once you do that, then I like to measure up about 4 inches and start my ribbon. I didn't have any small ribbon on hand with me, so I'm just going to use this as a guidance. And it's just a piece of fabric. And so you can play around where you want to put your ribbons, but I like to use purple Elmer's stick glue to stick down my ribbons. Some people like to use painter's tape to mark off the edge and then lay out their ribbon and sew it without doing any gluing or anything. I've never been successful with that, and I've made a fair amount of skirts. This helps it keep it down while you're working. Without having to really worry. But fair warning, if you glue today, you sew today. You sew the ribbons down to the same day that you glue. Do not leave it sit overnight. Don't say, oh, I'm going to glue it today and then next week I'm going to sew the ribbon. No. That glue only holds for a few hours. I promise. But it holds long enough for you to sew. Also, fair warning, because it is purple, even though it says, oh, it dries clear. No. If you have a light colored ribbon, make sure that once you put the glue on the ribbon, you smear the purple down with your finger. So that way you don't see that purple under there, and you will, I promise. Trial by error. So once you have that down, and it looks like this, then you can flip it over. And the second panel goes even faster because look, now you know where to lay your ribbons. You don't need to measure your second panel at all because it's already straight on your first panel. So all you need to do is glue the ribbons down and then sew them down. And then once you have them sewn down, I'll move that for now. Pretend you've got ribbons here. Once you have them sewn down, then you make right side in. So that way they're facing right side in. Sew up the sides. You can use an overlock stitch, which is a serger if you want. If you don't have a serger, you can sew your straight stitch here and then go over it again with a zigzag on the outside. I usually use a 1/2 inch seam allowance. A quarter is just not enough. Some of the skirts that I've had at a quarter have started to bust open at the seams. So you definitely want a further inseam. If you want a nice, if you want a nice seam where it's not sticking out, roll them like this. Roll them and then sew again. But if you do that, be aware you need to add extra inches for your seam allowance in your measurements. I don't add for that because I don't use that. Then once you have it all, your sides sewed together, don't really worry about pressing it yet. And then here is our top. You've already pressed your casing down, so now you need to sew your casing. So you're going to sew all the way along, all the way around your casing for your elastic. Leave a small amount open because you're going to insert your elastic through there. I don't use a bobby pin. They are just temperamental. You'll end up with a headache. Get a safety pin. It will do wonders. So once you thread your elastic through your casing all the way around, you're going to pull both ends of your elastic together, overlap them. Where's the end here? I don't have one, but anyway, overlap them and sew it as many times, back and forth, 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 so that way it doesn't come apart ever. Once you do that, then you can finish sewing the casing shut, that small amount that you left open. And then you'll want to do whatever you're going to do to the bottom. If you're doing a hem, you need to sew the hem all the way shut, which you've already pressed. If you're using bias tape, then you sew all the way around with bias tape. You can end bias tape by just sewing over the edge of it and then up. That's a simple, fast way to do it, but if you're wanting to join your bias tape, basically what you're going to have to do is start, but leave a long tail for your starting bias tape. Sew all the way around. Once you get almost there, you're going to have a long tail and cut. So each end is going to have a long tail. And then what you'll do is you'll open up the bias tape and then you'll bring them together like this, so that way they're butted like that. And then you will sew along that line right there, where they meet, and then you'll be able to trim off that extra bias tape in the that you have extra for, and you'll have a closed bias tape. I don't typically do that just because it's a kind of a pain, but I basically just sew the edge and then sew up like this. It's never come apart. It's never started to fray. If you're worried about fraying, then put it on the edge corner like this. So your end on this edge corner, and then zigzag up and down, and then it won't fray. But mine have never frayed. But anyway, that's the easiest way that I've learned how to make the skirt. Just that way, so the edges, this edge right here is the same on both panels. I've tried doing it where you just have your fabric and you try to cut this one and this one the same, and trying to make this bottom be in the middle and have this angle be the same is just really difficult. So if you do it this way, it'll be perfect the first time around, and you won't have to worry about things not lining up. Also, make sure when you sew the inside, it's like when you're sewing your sides up, that your ribbons line up. So if there's a ribbon here, then it needs to be here, even if this does not line up. So say, oh man, I farkled and it doesn't match up. Like, see how the paper doesn't match up. If it's too big, like it's really big like this, then you might want to take the ribbons off and try again. But if it's just a little bit like that, and it can be covered in the hem or in the bias tape, don't worry about it. Line your ribbons up, because I guarantee you, if your ribbons look like stair steps, people will notice. That's about all I've got. But yeah, I'm a plus size girl, and so are my girls, and this works very well. I have yet to go all the way to the edge of my waist, so that will also work for plus sizes. Alright, if you have any questions, just let me know.